When it comes to genetically modified food, then Hungary is one of the leaders in Europe and has a very strong position and really puts the environment and puts people at the forefront. What is at danger now through this free trade agreement is that everything that Hungary has gained may be lost, and we need Hungary to take a position here much stronger to say we don't want this free trade agreement if it impacts on our policy on genetically modified foods. The EU is trying to boost the economies on this side of the Atlantic, and America is trying to do the same on the other side of the Atlantic, and that's why they are negotiating this free trade agreement, which will be the biggest in history to try and boost these economies. That's their aim. Whether or not they can get that depends very much on where the public debate goes over the next years. And it will only work if we actually have the same laws as what we have in America. And in some cases, like food safety, it's very different. We have much stricter rules here than America. And for this free trade agreement to work, they're going to have to somehow make a compromise and weaken our food laws, our environmental laws, our social laws. We think that is too much to take for the benefits, which seem to be very small at this stage. Europe on the whole is very resistant to genetically modified foods and crops. We hardly grow any, we don't sell them. We take an agriculture in a different direction. And the problem is that big American companies are not happy with that. They cannot sell their GM products here in Europe, and they want to use this trade agreement to break the resistance, to open up our markets, and to force more genetically modified foods into the supermarket shelves. This free trade agreement is really the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of companies, big corporations there, are lobbying really hard to try and break down some of the laws we have in Europe so they can trade easier and they don't have to meet our safety standards. So this is part of a big process. There's lots of trade agreements around the world, but this is going to be the biggest one. This is the one they're really going for. New research has just come out showing that we're breaking our planetary boundaries on 4 out of 9 of our life support systems. So if human beings want to exist in the future on this planet, we need to make some changes. And what's the problem? We don't see this trade agreement dealing with any of these real serious issues about climate change, about the loss of biodiversity, about the amount of pollution caused from agrochemicals. These are not being dealt with by this trade agreement. So what is it dealing with? It seems like it's coming from the last century, and it's not dealing with the issues that are serious and need to be dealt with right now. What we urgently need to do is shift our economies and our trade patterns so it actually supports efforts to reduce climate change, that supports being able to coexist with nature, and also to actually support local economies. And that's where the jobs are, that's where communities are. And these trade agreements need to be turned on their head so they actually support and protect local people, local jobs, and also the environment. And that's not what they're doing at the moment. What we've seen a lot of protests building across Europe. Even at the weekend, there was 50,000 people in Berlin on the streets saying no to this TTIP, no to GM foods and factory farming. It's quite clear the public understand or have big concerns about the direction of where the politics is going and where the economies are going. And politicians seem to be in a completely different world, and they're going ahead with this free trade rules. Free trade's going to solve all our problems, when actually it's not. It's making those problems worse. So I think the public understand a lot more what's going on than some of our decision makers and politicians. I think first of all we need to stop this free trade agreement. It's going to make the situation a lot worse, and it's going to prevent us from bringing in solutions which are going to solve some of these real day issues for the public and for the environment. That needs to change. We need to change our economies. We need to give much more emphasis to reducing climate change, reducing our climate emissions, and also supporting biodiversity and how we can move our economies so we can actually support nature, reduce our resources and reduce our climate emissions at the same time of increasing the well-being of people, because at the end of the day it's about us as well. And I think that needs a big change in the thinking of politicians and governments, and starting off we need to stop this free trade agreement.